Good morning and welcome. I am Luis Laguerre, and I am the newly elected chair of the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, or commonly known as ACLA. I would like to thank you for joining us for our 2021 forecast on Latin America and the Caribbean conference. This conference brings together policymakers and business leaders from across the Americas to discuss trade developments and top issues impacting the region and identify opportunities for a more integrated and prosperous hemisphere. For more than 50 years, ACLA, along with the 23 American Chambers of Commerce across Latin America and the Caribbean, have advocated for free trade and the adherence to the rule of law, which are critical for creating the conditions for economic prosperity. For the second consecutive year, we are meeting virtually at a time when countries across our hemisphere and around the globe continue to face challenges brought about by the pandemic. And while we wish we were meeting in person, we are pleased to once again leverage this virtual platform to bring our annual conference and the ACLA network to you. COVID-19's impact has stretched far beyond what anybody could have ever predicted, and our region has been at the center of it. The economic fallout from measures taken in 2020 to mitigate the impact of the pandemic are still felt today and will continue to be felt for years to come. Although vaccines are a cause for optimism, there needs to be a continued focus on vaccine deployment across the region. According to the World Health Organization, Pan American Health Organization, and others, approximately 60% of the region is yet to be fully vaccinated. Now, more than ever, the business community can play a constructive role, working in partnership with governments to address these challenges. We welcome the US government's efforts to support vaccination campaigns in the region and encourage continued support. If we want to see regional economic stability, we need a healthy hemisphere. COVID-19 did create the space for conversation on digitalization. The ability to work remotely, opportunity for online education, access to virtual health, among other areas, was a thing of the future. Although the region may lag in full access, we now have an opportunity to build on bringing connectivity to more places in the region. Global supply chains have also been hit. Ports have closed, seen backlogs and delays, impacting businesses and highlighting the importance of trade facilitation measures and investments in infrastructure. At this time, as the face of the US business community in the hemisphere, the US Chamber and the AmChams are committed to working with governments and other partners to advance solutions to our shared challenges. It's precisely why we're having these conversations today and tomorrow, to hear from government and business leaders about the outlook for the global economy and international trade, talk about our path to recovery, the future of supply chains, and examine new drivers for sustainable and inclusive growth in a post-pandemic world. We are honored to feature government officials who will share their priorities for their respective countries and vision for the future. We will also hear from business executives, policymakers, and thought leaders as we examine opportunities to build new partnerships and chart a path for a more resilient future. Before I close, I'd like to extend a thank you to our Shares Leadership Circle, which has served an invaluable reserve of support and strategic guidance for ACLA. And thank you all again for joining us. We look forward to an excellent conference, and we'll see you tomorrow for the second session of our conference. It is my pleasure now to introduce Myron Brilliant, Executive Vice President and Head of International at the U.S. Chamber, for an outlook on global trade and the economy. Mr. Brilliant leads the largest international government relation programs of any U.S. trade association, working in over 50 markets. During the past decade, he has strengthened the global network of American chambers of commerce and foreign business associations, and deepened engagement with multilateral and regional organizations, including the G20, IDB, IMF, World Bank, and WTO. He has been at the forefront of the Chamber's international trade agenda and engagement on U.S.-China relations. Myron, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luis, for the kind and generous introduction, for kicking off this year's forecast on Latin America and the Caribbean Conference. Congratulations on your recent election as chair of the ACLA Governing Board. Your dedication to ACLA and AmCham Panama, along with your deep expertise in tax and global business issues as a partner at KPMG Panama, will be really instrumental and critical in advancing ACLA's policy priorities. On behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Neil Harrington, our Senior Vice President for the region, as well as Ann McKinney and others on the Latin America team at the Chamber, let me just say that we're all delighted that you joined such a distinguished group of ACLA chairs, and we look forward to working with you closely. I'd like to say also, Luis, a big thanks for ACLA's Leadership Circle companies for their support, and I know you've already recognized them as well. I've recognized Neil and Ann for their leadership of the Latin America work, and in particular for her leadership as ACLA's EVP. But let me also point out that Isabel and Maximiliano are also critical to the work that we did for this conference and all the work we do for America. So thank you all for the work on behalf of the Chamber. Let me just say how pleased I am to participate in the conference, which I think provides a strategic opportunity for the Chamber to highlight the importance of the Latin America and Caribbean region to the United States and focus on new opportunities for partnership to meet the current moment. And the current moment before us is a testament to the strength of this community of American chambers. We are going to be challenged, not just today with the pandemic and some of the other challenges we face in the region, but we need to make sure that the governments in Latin America and in the United States work together closely to impact change in a positive direction for the region. It's an important moment for the private sector. It's an important moment for government and other stakeholders. We've got to build back a stronger region. From our vantage point, as we examine the goals of reactivating our economies and promoting an inclusive and sustainable recovery, a shared commitment by the private sector and the Biden administration must be a top priority. Let me re-emphasize that. We want to work closely with the Biden administration and the governments in the region to advance prosperity in the region at a time of critical need. Let me touch upon a few issues that's happening in Washington and impacting the agenda for the Biden administration. No question, the Biden administration inherited a complex set of global and domestic challenges. Managing domestic politics with a razor-thin margin in the House and Senate has really impacted the administration in many clear ways, from the domestic economic policies to international trade and economic policies to national security decisions. Now more than ever, we need U.S. leadership to take actions that will be bold and increase our competitiveness not only at home, but also abroad, and help reignite the global economy, create jobs in the U.S., and create prosperity across the Latin America region. But we need to invest in America's infrastructure. It's a critical priority for the U.S. Chamber, a critical priority for our business community, and certainly for our government. It's critical also to a strong economic recovery and long-term competitiveness. We have underinvested for too long in our physical and digital infrastructure. And now we're seeing challenges in the global environment as a result. And we're also seeing challenges for issues like the supply chain, where we see bottlenecks across the United States, and particularly on the West Coast. Chamber President and CEO Suzanne Clark joined CEOs of many U.S. companies to participate in a meeting with the Vice President and other senior administration officials last week to talk about supply chain bottlenecks and the need to get this infrastructure package done. We have long advocated for investments in our infrastructure, and that's why we're doing everything we can to see the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package that passed by the Senate in August become law. There's more work to be done, however, going forward. Just as we're fighting, however, for the infrastructure deal, we're against a reconciliation bill that would threaten our fragile economic recovery and long-term competitiveness by hiking corporate taxes and diminishing incentives for investment and innovation. Trade also plays an important role in advancing our competitiveness and recovery, which is why we're calling on the Biden administration to embrace a forward-leaning, market-opening trade agenda. We haven't seen it materialize. This does include, obviously, re-engaging and finalizing trade negotiations with countries like the UK and Kenya, where those negotiations began. But we want to go further still. It also means promoting new initiatives in the Latin America region, as well as in other parts, including the Asia Pacific. It also means figuring out what the U.S.-China relationship looks like. We need a constructive, pragmatic, and mutually beneficial relationship. We're 8 months into the administration, and all the China tariffs remain. This is hurting U.S. companies, particularly small businesses, at a time of high inflation and economic uncertainty. China clearly continues to be an important market for U.S. business and a top priority for the administration to deal with. But the issues that are so critical, the systemic challenges, structural as well, posed by China's industrial, digital, and technology transfer policies, while they remain a challenge for the U.S.-China relationship, they're undercutting opportunities for greater cooperation in many other related areas. The business community's voice is clearly needed on these issues and many other global challenges. Whether we're talking about climate mitigation and resiliency, pandemic response and prevention, or energy security, we need to work together more cohesively, as well as recognize our respective responsibilities. It's the private sector that brings these tools and technologies vital to addressing the challenging issues facing the region and the world. Yet too often, when governments focus on these issues, the business community is not at the table. This is true also for our own government. We've got to address this challenge. As the countries of the region grapple with the challenges of a global pandemic on uneven global economic recovery, let me highlight two areas ripe for collaboration, and that's health and sustainability. First, of course, the pandemic, front and center for all of us, and we're very concerned about the variants that are out there. We're concerned about vaccine hesitancy in the United States, and we're frankly concerned about the vaccination rates in countries across the Latin America region. The pandemic has reminded us how much health matters, not only to individuals and society, but also to our recovery. It has highlighted the importance of investing in health, building, as I said earlier, greater resiliency, bolstering healthcare systems, and enabling innovative technology to improve health outcomes. Simply put, better health promises economic growth. We share common interests in strengthening collaboration around these health priorities. Second, sustainability is a global priority that calls for greater collaboration and essential to long-term economic growth. We've got to address this as a global community. This is not just a U.S. problem or a problem for the region, Latin America region. This is a collective problem. To address sustainability challenges, our coordinated efforts in the United States and around the world have to improve. We have to advance sustainable development policies focused on driving innovation and improvements in resource efficiency across sectors and building capabilities and resiliency. We're going to be in Glasgow. We are going to participate in addressing these global challenges, but we're looking for opportunities to partner between government and the business. And this is critical to finding any solutions, not just short-term, but long-term as we address these issues. Opportunities in the Americas. Let's focus now in my remaining time on what's going on in the region and why we're so bullish on the Americas and why we need to promote policies that can contribute to a healthy hemisphere and sustainable and inclusive growth. You'll see over the course of this conference, and I really want to highlight the tremendous work that's been done to create a great forum, a great conference, and hopefully a great dialogue throughout. There are opportunities, we believe, right now to take advantage of digital transformation, supply chain rebalancing, and trade and investment. Today, we're calling on the United States and the regional private sector to come together to support a forward-looking agenda for the region and renew our commitment to strengthening the adherence to issues like the rule of law in the region, to work with organizations like ACWA who are advancing economic and trade policies for a sustainable and inclusive region. In the Americas, we have an opportunity to strengthen our competitiveness and promote an inclusive and sustainable recovery by expanding and deepening our trade investment ties. This clearly includes the region's integration into global supply chains, taking advantage of proximity and building on the existing network of trade agreements. But there's competition, not just in the Americas, but around the world. So with the focus on rebalancing supply chains, we've got to get governments to seize the opportunity to attract new investment by committing to the rule of law, strengthening their commitments, adopting a pro-growth tax policies, investing in the infrastructure that we talked about in the U.S., and taking other measures to really strengthen the enabling environment. We can enhance our trade advantage by promoting the implementation of trade facilitation measures, renewing the U.S. trade preference programs, taking full advantage of existing agreements, and seizing new opportunities to expand trade in the region. It can happen. The Summit of the Americas in 2022 is a clear opportunity also to show and demonstrate unity across the region. The upcoming Summit of the Americas presents, in our view, an opportunity to show U.S. leadership and to make a commitment to how we really forge ahead in building our efforts across the region. For the first time since 1994, the United States will host this meeting. And we believe that the United States leadership is committed to offering this platform for advancing not only regional, but multilateral approaches for policies that will build back a stronger, more resilient, inclusive, and democratic hemisphere. The Chamber is proud to play a leadership role in facilitating the U.S. private sector's participation in the summit process. More on that coming soon, but needless to say, we think mechanisms like the Americas Business Dialogue are critical components of the summit process, and we believe that ACWA has a critical role as well to play here. We're committed to working with the Biden-Harris administration closely. The business community and other stakeholders want to ensure that the summit results in a strong partnerships between the private sector and government and concrete, tangible actions to build a more resilient and inclusive hemisphere. Let me end by just saying how important a time this is. The region is still struggling with economic anxiety and uncertainty, political change perhaps in the region. No question, the pandemic looms large over the region as well. This is a time where the American business community stands up and plays a critical role, encouraging our government to be advancing opportunities in the region and working closely with governments in hand-to-hand with the American chambers and of all of our companies to make change happen, to look forward, to advance common prosperity, to promote jobs, to create opportunities to address new technology innovations that will help us achieve a more inclusive and sustainable hemisphere. We can't sit back. We can't afford to sit back. And with your help, the Secretary is going to follow up on what is a successful 21 by staking out a robust agenda for engagement in 22. I want to thank you on behalf of Neil and Ann and the entire team for everything you're doing to be our stalwart partners. Really, we count on you for your leadership, your guidance, and your advice. Luis, thank you very much for the introduction. And I turn this over to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Myron, for sharing your insights on global priorities and for reaffirming the Chamber's commitment to the region with that call to action. The importance of U.S. leadership to meet the current moment cannot be overstated. As the business community, we have the opportunity to work with the administration and our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean to come out from the pandemic even stronger. And now our program will turn to the topic of sustainability, which is at the top of the agenda of global priorities and one where private sector leadership and collaboration can make a difference. To help us take a closer look at the ways in which the private sector is incorporating sustainability into their business operations, we're very pleased to be joined by two companies that are leaders on sustainability, CHEP and Cargill. I'd now like to turn to my colleague, Cassia Carvalho, who works with our colleagues across the chamber on global sustainability issues and leads on sustainability in the Americas, in addition to serving as executive director of our Brazil-US Business Council. Cassia, over to you.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I am Cassia Carvalho, Executive Director at the Americas Department at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and so glad that you could join us today for this very important conversation. You know, the business community recognizes that the future of Latin America depends on sustainability strategies being central to economic policy and growth. And yet, the challenge for the region has been how to reconcile the need for economic growth and the necessity to protect and manage its resources and biomes in order to achieve sustainable development, inclusive growth, and to be able to feed the world. Demand is growing for the region's commodities and natural capital. So for this very important conversation today, I am delighted to be joined by Paola Flores, President of CHAP Latin America, a Brambles company. She's calling today from Italy. Welcome, Paola. I am also joined by Antonio Corociano Villalobos, Regional Managing Director for Cargill, calling us from Peru. Welcome you both. We look forward to hearing from you and learning from you and how you are moving sustainability on the ground. Let me turn to you first, Paola. Please share about CHAP's sustainability goals and how you are implementing it across the region.
Yes. So thanks, Cassia, and thanks for the invitation to this important conference. CHEP, as you said, is part of Brambles group, and it's a global supply chain company operating in more than 60 countries in the world. Our circular business model facilitates the share and the reuse of the world's largest pool of assets, meaning pallets and containers. And this enables CHEP to serve its customers while minimizing the impact on the environment and on the supply chain, so making the supply chain more and more efficient. Talking about sustainability, we are proud to say that last year we have communicated our new ambition, which is based on the regenerative approach. And it's based on 3 pillars: planet positive, business positive, and community positive. These 3 pillars are the core of our sustainability strategy. And around these 3 pillars, we have built all the targets for 2025. For example, we can mention that in the planet positive area, we have targets like 100% of lumber purchased from sustainable forest, or chain of custody, or the mitigation and reduction of CO2 emissions. In the business positive, we have all the collaborations with our customers in order to decrease the CO2 emissions. But we also have the 40% of women in managerial roles. And in community positive, we have all the collaborations with associations like Food Bank or Feeding America in North America, for example, in order to fight against the food waste and be the ambassador for the circular economy. So this is our sustainability strategy, very strong and based on the regenerative approach. We want to go net positive.
Thank you, Paola. Very interesting indeed to learn more about your sustainability pillars. Antonio, let me turn to you now. Can you please share Cargill's approach to sustainability and what that encompasses, and how are you seeing the role of agriculture in promoting sustainability across Latin America?
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here with you. For us, I mean, since Cargill purpose is basically to nurture the world in a sustainable, safe, and responsible way, this is what we are. I mean, we basically are in the middle of a huge supply chain that tries to originate and produce agricultural products and take it to the places where it's needed in the most effective and efficient way. And we believe that sustainability has become a critical part of our strategy, since we need to face the reality that there is a challenge for us in the world, to all of us, to protect and preserve the native vegetation of a lot of countries in Latin America, while at the same time help the production of food to supply to the world. So we believe that in the center of this discussion is to understand the context and have as our best ally as the farmer, the agricultural producer, and all the communities and all the workers that are around the production of agricultural commodities, in order to help them be more sustainable, understand their concerns, understand their challenges, and help them become much more sustainable throughout the time. So we are in Cargill now in our day-to-day activity facing the reality of understanding the concept of both sides of the supply chain. We understand what is happening within the countries that we serve, in Brazil, in Peru, in Bolivia, in Paraguay, in different countries that are producers. And we also understand the needs and the requirements of a challenging demand of customers that are more and more concerned, and they want to understand the supply chains that they are buying from. So having and being in the center of that supply chain give us enough context to understand. And basically what I can tell you is that this is a challenging issue that needs a lot of the stakeholders being together in understanding and facing it in the best way possible to try to sort it out and find a way that we can coexist in keeping our forests in the world, but at the same time the demand of the food that it's needed in the future. So we are developing our policies based on transparency of understanding our supply chain, trying to achieve zero deforestation in our supply chains in the different commodities that we serve, using technology, using innovation in order to get there, and at the same time supporting our farmers, supporting and understanding their concerns and helping their communities as well.
Very important point, Antonio, that the farmers are at the heart of agriculture, right, and feeding the world, and we need to support them on the ground as well. So as we think about agriculture in the future to feed the world, and the solutions very often are left to the companies to find innovative solutions, right? Paola, let me go back to you. How do you see the future of sustainability, and how can sustainability be replicated and implemented in a greater scale?
Yes, so the future of sustainability for us is really regeneration. No? We need to go to a higher level of ambition. Doing less bad is not enough, is no longer enough. We need to do more, and we need to go for the net positive. We think that really this is the future. And in our vision, it's also the time that the businesses go from the commitments that they have done during the last few years to the action, to the execution. An example for us, it's the forest positive approach that we are taking. Our equation is to go from 2 to 1, 2 for 1, because what we are doing is to grow 2 trees for each tree that we are using for our pallets. So 2 for 1 is the going positive. It is our approach, and we really think that it's our commitment that can be spread as an approach, a commitment to become an action plan to grow millions of trees in the next decade, and use 1 tree for us and 1 tree for the planet.
Very good. So staying with the future of sustainability, let me go to Antonio now. Antonio, how is innovation driving change in the agriculture sector, and how do you see innovation enabling more sustainable food systems?
Okay, in innovation, I mean, I would say that today we can do things that in the past were unthinkable to do. You know, our ability to reach the producers in a way that the number of producers, the vast area that we are trying to cover in understanding our supply chain would have been impossible to do without technology. Today we have a way to connect with the farmers, to understand through satellites where they are located, and try to map the areas where our products are being sourced. So it's a way that we can help them, and then we can also at the same time help the consumer to understand where the product is coming from. So technology will give not only the farmer the ability to be much more effective in their production, but also it will bring transparency to the supply chain by showing and where the products are coming from and how they're being managed throughout the supply chain. So that's one of the examples. We have developed some tools that are in the hands of our final consumers in the world, that they can trace back and understand where their palm is being produced in Latin America, and in some cases where their soy is also produced. So our ambition, our objective is to have that 100% done. But today with the technology, it's something that it could become a reality soon, that probably years ago would have been impossible with the number of producers that there are, the complexity of our countries, which are not easy to access, and the vast territory that needs to be covered. So today, with those tools and the innovation and the collaboration with different stakeholders, we talk to our customers, we talk to the farmers, and we are able to bring technologies that are used maybe in other industries, adapted to the context of their agriculture, and produce products and services that can be used by the farmer or the supply chain or the logistics in order to make them more transparent and more efficient. Because this is also a matter of making it effective and sustainable and cost possible. So technology is allowing allowing us to do that in different steps. Is not, there's no single bullet or something, one thing that is going to solve all the problems. This is an extremely complex issue, but there's a number of things that we have deployed in innovation and in connection with different stakeholders, that the combination of all is going to bring the solution that we are all aiming for.
Antonio, I want to stick with you for one moment. You raised a very important issue, resilience, something that we talk a lot about now, right? When disasters strike, we still need to move food, we still need to ensure the livelihood of farmers. How do you ensure resilience across your operations and supply chains? And how can the logistics infrastructure be more resilient across the region?
That's a very good question, because coming out of the pandemic that we've seen and other events, we have also seen the resilience of the supply chain, and also the complexities that it has. I mean, I can give you examples like in the hurricanes that hit the North America in the past couple of months, and last year that it also hit Central America, that hit also the supply chains of exports of palm. You can see how resilient the supply chain is. And our approach is initially and mostly important based on the people. We need to make sure that people is resilient, that people is safe. So basically, when disaster hit, the first and most important thing that we need to take care of is our people, our teams and the communities, to make sure that they can be brought back to normal and in a safe way, in order to maintain the supply chains operating. And we've seen tremendous efforts in all these different situations, COVID, hurricanes, etc., that we've seen how resilient from the farmer to the supply chain. We've seen it live in reality. The approach that we have of making sure that people is resilient, and then the connection, because this is basically what we have is a network of capabilities from the origin to the destination that need to be very well connected in order to make the supply chain works. So as Cargill, we make sure that people is safe, and then the connections and the communications that need to happen in order to bring that operation back to in line, it's as fast as we can. We've seen it in COVID, we've seen it in the hurricanes. Obviously, it takes a lot of effort of a lot of people to make it a reality, but we've seen it happening. We've seen it because of the I think the first thing is that people understand what is the reality, what is the situation that they are facing, and the importance of the role, the importance that we have as Cargill and our customers and our partners, the importance of the role, the purpose of what they are doing, which is feeding the world, is basically what motivates them the most to be back in line as soon as they can. So I've seen those supply chains being resilient. Obviously, we need to keep up the assets in shape, but I would say the most critical thing is keep our people safe and well equipped in order to perform their important duties.
Yes, very well said, Antonio. And the demand is only growing, right, to feed the world, and pressure on our region to feed the world. I want to go back to you, Paola. You gave us, as you were describing your sustainability strategy, you gave us reason to be optimistic that with innovation, there are solutions out there, but these solutions need to be implemented, right? You need to be able to implement them across the region. What are the greatest challenges that you face in Latin America in achieving sustainability and your sustainability commitments and ambitions?
Yeah, so no, I want to say that I cannot agree more with Antonio what he just said on the resilience. But going back to my question, yes, so we see challenges in Latin America, of course, and the first is really how we can transform the economy from linear to circular. No, it's we are doing it, promoting the reuse model over the recycling model, and this is something that we feel the ambassador as pioneer, or really the circular economy. Another challenge that we have and we see is the understanding of the supply chain end to end. Antonio touched it a little bit in his last answer, but if you can map the supply chain from the beginning to the end, you really have the opportunity to find opportunities, to find new ways to contribute to sustainability and contribute to the environment. Just let's only think about the opportunity to reduce the emissions. Now we have a great opportunity in the supply chain in particular. And then something that Antonio touched very well is the connection. I would say the collaboration among the private sectors, like our companies, but also the public, the governments, the associations, the NGOs, all the parties that can contribute to make our society, our world more sustainable. I was thinking about last week, we celebrated the World Food Day. And in the world, we are wasting 1/3 of the food produced overall. In Latin America, we are wasting 6% of it, which is huge considering the 47 million people suffering from hunger. And here, again, collaboration, connection is key. The example I can make is that we collaborate all over the world with the food banks or with Feeding America in North America, for example. But the collaboration with these organizations is key to provide meals, to provide resources, provide volunteering hours, but also provide some more awareness to our employees about this fight, which is very important against food waste. So collaboration end to end, and really going positive with the regeneration approach.
Yes, very important, right? It depends on all stakeholders. It takes all stakeholders working together. Paola, I was hearing recently about your initiative with reforestation. We cannot talk about our region without thinking about the forest biomes of our region, right? And how they will contribute to the NDCs. Can you share a little bit more about your forest program?
Yes, so we have decided to go positive in the forestry project as well. And our equation is very simple. Is as I said, is 2 trees for 1. Each tree that we use for our pallet building, per each tree we replant 2 trees. So 1 for us and 1 for the planet. This is something that we are very proud of. And we have also a program across all the globe about the sourcing from sustainable forest. And in Latin America, we have already reached 100%, meaning that 100% of our lumber is coming from sustainable forests. This is an incredible result for us and incredibly challenging during this period of post-pandemic.
No, very good, Paola, very good, very important to know, especially as our countries define their strategies to meet their climate commitments, right? I do believe that the private sector has a very important role to play in contributing to our region achieving climate commitments. We are quickly running out of time, but I do want to give the opportunity to each one of you to share your final message, takeaway from our region about sustainability, and all the stakeholders that play a very important role, from governments to clients to the private sector to customers globally. What would be your final message?
I can start. My short final message. It's let's go from commitment to action all together.
Very important.
Yeah, that's a great and very powerful message, because this is a very complex topic, and I think the challenges of humanity today, and the most difficult ones, are based on the connection of different stakeholders that need to work together in order to make it a reality and make it in a practical way. And for that, we need to increase the understanding of the context of each stakeholder. We need to understand the context of the agriculture. We need to understand the context of the farmers in the different countries that we are, and we need to understand, obviously, the context of the demand. And basically, having that, increasing that understanding will probably show the light of more and more innovation and more solutions that will together be able to do our objective, which is feeding the world in a sustainable and responsible way.
Very well said. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us in this very important conversation. Please count on us, the U.S. Chamber, to advance your message and to be a platform for the solutions and the innovation that you guys are developing on the ground and making it happen. So with that, thank you so much for today's conversation.
Thank you, Cassia, and thanks again to Paola Flores of CHEP, a Brambles company, and to Antonio Corrochano of Cargill for inspiring us with their examples of their company's commitment to sustainability, their vision and strategies. We've heard clearly it's important to move from commitment to action. And now for our presidential keynote, we're honored to welcome the President of Panama, Laurentino Cortizo. Panama is an example of a country with a forward-looking agenda on trade, supply chains, and sustainability, and we're honored to have President Cortizo with us today. Together with our outstanding partners at AmCham Panama, we are optimistic about the opportunities for even closer trade and investment between our two countries. I'm very pleased to now turn over to the floor to my colleague, Neil Harrington, Senior Vice President for the Americas, for this conversation with President Cortizo. Neil, over to you.
It's my true honor to welcome His Excellency Laurentino Nito Cortizo Cohen, President of the Republic of Panama, to ACLA's forecast on Latin America and the Caribbean. As many of you will know, President Cortizo was elected in 2019 as the 38th President of the Great Republic of Panama. Prior to assuming the presidency, President Cortizo had a very distinguished career both in business and in public service, in which posts included President of the Panamanian National Assembly and Minister of Agriculture in the administration of President Martín Torrijos. The President also knows the U.S. extremely well, having spent many years at the Organization of American States in Washington, and having studied at the great University of Texas at Austin, where he obtained both an MBA and PhD in international trade and marketing. Mr. President, like leaders across our region, you've had to confront the devastating dual health and economic crises of the COVID-19 pandemic. But after the economic impact of the virus caused the Panamanian economy to contract by nearly 18% last year, all signs point to growth roaring back this year, as the World Bank estimates Panamanian GDP will grow by 10% in 2021. We're very pleased to have you with us today because the U.S. business community is bullish on Panama, and we're interested in hearing more about what you've done to mitigate the health crisis and to drive economic reactivation. We're also interested in steps you've taken to enhance Panama's competitiveness as a destination for foreign investment, especially when it comes to leveraging opportunities related to potential supply chain rebalancing from Asia and other parts of the world. And you've also taken a regional leadership role in addressing two other crises in climate change and migration. So I hope we have a chance to touch on those areas as well. As you know, Mr. President, the U.S. Chamber and its members have long been committed to Panama, and neither you nor we have a better partner in advancing the bilateral economic relationship than our great partners at AmCham Panama. Both AmCham and we are grateful for your time today. So with your permission, I'll just jump right into our questions. Mr. President, related to COVID-19, if you would take us through your government's response to the pandemic and how you've managed to balance vaccine distribution with keeping open critical economic functions, and specifically, what measures have you taken to support the tourism and hospitality sector so critical to the Pan American economy?
Okay,
Excuse me.
thank you very much, Neil, for this opportunity. On the COVID side, first of all, we do have a very good team, health team, well organized, well disciplined, and aligned. I installed an operation center for COVID, for dealing with COVID on Sunday night, February 2nd, 2020, the year 2020. That Sunday was the Sunday of the Super Bowl between Kansas City and the San Francisco 49ers. I remember quite well that night. We installed a team, a health team, with different institutions under the coordination of the Ministry of Health. And on that day, I also instructed that the process for decision-making was going to be very clear. We didn't want people improvising. So we decided, not really that we designed, because the method, the procedure that we use here in Panama, and I have been using for all my political life, is I borrowed from one of the greatest pilot fighter from the US, Lieutenant John Boyd. So my team, the health team, the task still is to observe what's going on in the world, especially with respected centers, organization, university. Analyze it, and then present to me recommendations. Every Monday I receive written recommendation, and I will evaluate them and decide if they go forward or they do not go forward. During this pandemic period, all my decisions on the pandemic were related to the recommendation of people that knows more than I do about this monumental problem. So that was very, very important for us. On the other hand, from day one, this is an invisible enemy. So the only way for us to know where the enemy was doing testing, and testing. Tracking. We have a very robust tracking team around the country. And the positives, they were quarantined, 14 days quarantine. House, depending of the condition. We have hospitals, or hospitals. The people that didn't have enough resources, we guarantee their food. That was another thing very important. That balance between health, that's a triangle that I always mention to the team, that balance between health, the social aspect, and the economic aspect. But that was the main focus. Testing. The other thing that is important for Panama, we never hide here in Panama positive cases or people, regardless if they have hypertension, or they are obese, or if they are with diabetes. We never hide the people that die because of COVID. Never. And you could ask, for example, the Pan American Health Organization, the representative here, Dr. Alfaro. That for us was very clear from day one. On the vaccination process, the strategy, let me tell you that from the beginning, matter of fact, it was in June last year, the team, the expert on vaccines, we decided here in Panama to use Pfizer and AstraZeneca, period. And that's what we got. We got enough vaccine for every person here in Panama. And at this moment, Panama has, with 2 shots, the 75.4% people vaccinated with 2 shots, 2 vaccines. So that's what we have been doing. And it has been the process, the strategy of vaccinating that many people has taken a team. I have mentioned team. This is the second time that I mentioned team. For me, the team, the discipline, the organization is non-negotiable. This is very important. We have to be very disciplined when we have this type of big issues. And in the tourism, one of, or the main or the best economic recovery policy for Panama or any country is a well-executed vaccination program with good vaccines. That's the best economic recovery policy. In tourism, we have been advancing because we, for example, the hotel owners, they have the opportunity now to begin reopening safely. We do have programs related, for example, right now, we have the a tourism vaccination program for countries in Latin America utilizing AstraZeneca. We began that program on Friday, October 1st. We also do have, I just signed a law with a lot of incentives for the agro-tourism. Matter of fact, right now, in this moment, this week, we do have a Congress, rural tourism from Iberoamerica right now here in Panama. Also, we have the Black Week that has been really successful. There's a lot of people coming here to Panama to take advantage of the discounts that they are all over the country, especially on with the big malls. But on the pandemic, we are right now on the right track. We are doing. It's a lot of hard work with a lot of organization. There is a structured team. And every week, myself, Monday at 11:30 a.m., I meet with the operation center for the pandemic to receive how things are, progressing, and they are doing really good right now.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I think that's really well said, because you can't have the kind of economic reactivation, the kind of growth you're experiencing without a great testing plan initially, and now your vaccine administration plan. So thank you for sharing that. Let me move quickly to the subject that I know is also of great importance to you and your government of what we term nearshoring. You've identified it as a key economic priority and for Panama to be very competitive when it comes to taking advantage of supply chain relocation from Asia and other parts of the world. Tell us about some of the measures your government is taking to enhance Panama's competitiveness on this front.
Thank you, Neil. So you have been seeing in TV, different CNN and different channels in the US and in the world, the issues that, for example, in this case, the US is having with the supply chain, how is the supply chain affecting the economic recovery of many countries? In this case, the US, what's going on, for example, in LA, the back off of many container ships, the shortage, for example, of truck drivers. And that's a big issue for the US and for the world. And we have been seeing that. And then nearshoring for Panama has become and is a key issue, because we should take advantage. Why should Panama take advantage of that? First of all, we do have here in Panama is the best maritime and air connectivity of Latin America and the Caribbean. There is not any other country in Latin America and the Caribbean that has the connectivity that Panama has. As you know, 6% of the world commerce go through the Panama Canal. We are a dollarized economy. Panama connects 180 routes. We connect 1,920 ports in 170 countries. We have more than 170 countries, 170 multinational companies that their regional headquarters are here in Panama. So nearshoring, if a businessman or executive is analyzing a place for nearshoring, there is not a better place than Panama. Also, the political stability of Panama is good. So, taking into account all those positive things that we do have, I have no doubt to recommend that the best place for nearshoring, especially for Latin America and the Caribbean, is Panama. No doubt at all.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I think, again, very well said. So many U.S. companies benefit exactly from the centrality of Panama, all of us who are in the region a lot, and also the great human capital that Panamanians add to U.S.
For example, Neil, and excuse me, you have what kind of multinational? You have, for example, Procter & Gamble.
Yep.
You have Samsung. We have Google. We have these big multinationals. So for them to decide to have the regional offices here in Panama, that's a very good sign that things in Panama are being done the right way.
Absolutely. That's certainly the experience of our companies, Caterpillar, Intel, and others. Yeah, absolutely, sir. I know we're tight on time. I want to be very respectful of your schedule, but I wonder if we can maybe get to two questions quickly, one on climate, one on migration. I'll start with climate. You recently hosted the high-level dialogue on climate action in the Americas, and Panama will also serve as host for the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas Ministerial in February of 2022. Climate is clearly a priority for you. Could you discuss your administration's approach to climate and sustainability and their importance to government's agenda?
Listen, Neil. Climate, common sense, tell us human beings that climate should be the priority in the world. Climate is affecting the life of every one of us. And I'm going to be, as I am always, I'm going to be really frank with you. There has been and is a lot of talk by world leaders about climate change and the effects, and talking about for example, the terrible effects on rising temperature, wildfires, flood, droughts, the effects on producing food, a lot of talks. What do we need? Actions. And by the end of this month and the beginning of November, world leaders are going to be meeting for the COP26 in Glasgow. So that's the moment not only of beautiful speeches, but it is the moment of action. time is closing, and I'm going to, I like to take notes. The people who knows me, that they know that I like to take notes, but I'm going to check. I brought some of the quotes on the Secretary General of United Nations, his speech at the United Nations. Look at what he says. We are on the edge of an abyss and moving in the wrong direction. Our world has never been more threatened or more divided. That's very profound words and a very huge alert. The world leaders need to take actions. Time for words, hey, that's it. We need actions. The effect of climate change is really hard and profound.
Again, Mr. President, thank you for those words. The phrase that comes to mind in English is "talk is cheap," and you were so right about that. You know, when going to Glasgow, I think the whole world is looking to action coming out of Glasgow. So we appreciate your leadership on this subject. Last question, if you would, on migration. The crisis in Haiti has had a serious impact on the region, obviously, but before that, you have experienced the crisis of Venezuelan migrants. We recently hosted your good friends, President Duque from Colombia. He said the two of you work very collaboratively on immigration issues. You also work with the presidents of Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic, met with them at the UN General Assembly recently. Talk, if you would, about the strategies that are being discussed by your three countries of Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, and Panama, and what kind of support you're receiving from the United States given the urgency of the crisis.
Well, let me ask you, let me respond the last one. I do have a very good relationship, my administration, with the US. We are a strategic ally. We have been a strategic ally, commercial ally. On this issue, we need more action, but coordinated action. Let me tell you something. The rising level of irregular immigrants, especially from Haiti, they are trailing, and I'm going to give you the sequence. They are going from Haiti or from some countries, including charter planes from the Caribbean to South America. They then go through Colombia, and I do have a very good frank relationship with the president of Colombia, with Duque. And from Colombia, they pass Panama towards the US. So look how many countries are involved in this huge problem. And it is unsustainable. It's no way that we could sustain that. For example, I'm going to give you some numbers. As of September, over 100,000 people have gone through Panama. And we expect around 50,000 more to the end of the year. 50,000 more that will reach borders by December of this year, bringing the total of at least 150,000 people. It is an unprecedented number in Panama. What we need to do, and we need to do it fast, time is against us, and you could see that on the border of the US, is to have a high-level meeting, and we have instructed myself, President of Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, instructed our Minister of Foreign Affairs to get in touch with these different countries, presidents and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Migration, to have with the US, United Nations, an urgent meeting, especially to take concrete measures related, for example, with visa. They do not have visa. And also, we need information of each one of the people that are crossing and going into the US. what do we need in this region and in the world? Again, the problem is solved, Neil, with political will. Sending a high-level official to talk to 2 or 3 countries, for example, Triángulo Norte, it will not help, because that's one part of the problem. We have to sit in a room and state the facts and say, listen, this cannot continue, and do some concrete measurement to begin stopping that. We have been analyzing alternatives. I know that the US right now is taking these irregular immigrants and flying them back to Haiti. Our budget here in Panama, as in any other country, is limited. And we do have here in Panama a lot of needs, social needs. And we have been, and the cost of maintaining those irregular immigrants, for us, is unsustainable. So we need to get in touch with the US and all of these countries. We know which countries are. I mean, this is not like we don't know the countries. We do know the countries that are chartering. We know where are they stopping, how they are walking through Colombia, Panama. We know that. So we need to sit down as soon as possible. And that's the way to, at the end, have some concrete solution to minimize the huge problem that you are getting, I am getting in Panama, but the US is getting also this huge problem. I could see it every day in your television. Neil, I know that the time is going fast, but do you have any other question concerning, well, not college football, but college football is please, no question about college football, but soccer, yes.
I would be remiss, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for that last answer, because I think it was spot on. Just like you said on climate, it's time for action, not talk, right? And it's time for collective action for our region to address migration. It's not just for each country to handle, but for collective. So thank you for stating it that way. Yeah, look, I'd be remiss as an American. I have to congratulate you on that fantastic victory by Los Canaleros against the U.S. Not even a shot on goal that the U.S. got. A rocking Estadio Romel Fernandez. So last, I want you to have the last word on that, or anything else you want. But how do you see the path of the Selección Panameña towards Qatar?
It's not easy, but we do have it's a young team with a big heart. We have a good technician. The team is disciplined, even though we didn't play as disciplined as we should in El Salvador game. But the road, the journey towards the Qatar is huge. I mean, it's a lot of road in front of us, and it was a good win. It was a good win. Where did you go to school? What university, Neil?
I went to the University of Pennsylvania, so I can't say that we have a program like your Longhorns. I was sorry about the Red River Classic. I really thought they had it, and but Texas football is back. Let's be clear, Mr. President.
It's back with Coach Sarkisian.
That's correct.
But you have a good basketball team.
Absolutely. Again. So, Mr. President, you've been more than generous with your time. We are deeply appreciative. Count on us at the U.S. Chamber, our partners at AmCham Panama, to support everything that you're doing to bring investment and trade to Panama. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for this opportunity. Have a good week.
Good morning. I am honored to welcome Congressman Albiosiris, Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, Civilian Security, Migration, and International Economic Policy. Congressman Series has been an active member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee since he was first elected in 2006 to the U.S. Congress, where he represents the 8th Congressional District of New Jersey. In this role, Congressman Series works to build closer relationships with U.S. allies across the hemisphere to advance shared economic and security interests and promote the values of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. He has been a leading advocate for the promotion of U.S. leadership and democratic ideals in the Western Hemisphere and to strengthening U.S. partnerships to contribute to the region's prosperity and security. He brings a deep personal connection to the region and long-standing professional commitment to strengthening U.S. engagement with the countries of the Western Hemisphere. For the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, and our partners at the 23 AmChams across the region that the U.S. Chamber works with to strengthen this important strategic partnership, it's a great pleasure to have Congressman Series with us today. A proactive agenda for U.S. engagement with the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean is more important than ever for our shared future. Latin America and the Caribbean has been especially hard hit by the economic, social, and public health challenges presented by COVID-19, in addition to the challenges of an unprecedented wave of migration across the region and the need to strengthen rule of law and democratic institutions. Congressman Series, thank you so much for taking time from your busy agenda to join us today.
Well, thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and in the Caribbean for inviting me to speak today. As chairman of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, I am committed to deepening U.S. engagement throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, this region is facing tremendous challenges. Latin America was hit harder by the COVID pandemic than any other part of the world. Natural disasters have devastated communities in Haiti, Honduras, Guatemala, and Nicaragua over the last year. While some countries' economies are rebounding from the pandemic, others are held back by delayed vaccine rollouts, slow recoveries for industries like tourism and supply chain disruption. After decades of democratic progress, we are now seeing democratic declines in many parts of the region. Corruption continues to deter foreign investment and reduce opportunities for economic growth. At the same time, there are some positive examples in the region. I recently held a bipartisan congressional delegation to the Dominican Republic. I was impressed by Abinader's administration's seriousness about tackling corruption. President Abinader appointed an independent attorney general who is prosecuting corrupt actors regardless of their party affiliation. He is reforming the police and the public procurement process. These steps will help the Dominican Republic become a destination for foreign investment and nearshoring opportunities. The tremendous challenges facing this region provide an opportunity for the United States to demonstrate that this region is a priority for us. Beginning in January, I urged the White House to donate vaccines to the region. Ultimately, the U.S. has sent over 140 million doses globally, including more than 40 million to countries in the Western Hemisphere. This is far more than China or Russia. Still, the Chinese government took advantage of the situation by sending vaccines early when countries needed it most. Some of our partners feel that they were forced into the arms of China. Now the U.S. needs to step up in supporting the region's economic recovery from the pandemic. In the global competition with China, the United States' comparative advantage is our innovative private sector. The U.S. government and private sector need to work together to promote conditions that strengthen the rule of law, reduce corruption, and enable inclusive economic growth. I believe that if we want to advance the values of economic competition and democratic governance, we need to make the Western Hemisphere a priority for U.S. foreign policy. Thank you again to the Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to speak, and thank you everyone who has joined us today.
Thank you, Congressman Sears. You mentioned China, and we know that in recent years, China's trade and investment in Latin America and the Caribbean has grown exponentially, such that China is a leading trade partner for an important number of countries. Could you discuss some of the efforts in Congress to strengthen U.S. competitiveness vis-a-vis China, and share your perspective on what opportunities this could present for closer trade and investment in Latin America and the Caribbean?
Well, I'm excited about the nearshoring bill that Congressman Green and I are working on. I think that is a real positive step in trying to bring some of these industry back into the region and some of the areas that are close to us. I don't see, and as Congressman Green points out, I don't see why we have to go all the way to China when we have such good partners in the Western Hemisphere. And if we can bring some of the those industry into the area, I think it's not only going to help the United States, but it's also going to help some of these countries. So Congressman Green and I are working hard to see how we can make this happen. But I think it's one of the best efforts that we have made in years in order to end this dependency on China.
Thank you. As you noted, the pandemic has clearly exacerbated some of the longstanding regional challenges, such as inequality, corruption, and insecurity. Could you talk more about what the U.S. government and the U.S. private sector can be doing to enhance the rule of law and increase economic opportunity?
Well, as far as the government is concerned, I've been working hard to get the Renacer Act passed into law to increase pressure on regimes like the Ortega regime in Nicaragua. I hope that we can finally bring that legislation into the House this month and pass it. The bill creates additional authorities to sanction Ortega's regime officials who violate human rights and commit acts of corruption, and help coordinate our sanctions with Canada and the European Union. The legislation will also expand oversight of financial institutions lending money to Nicaragua. I was very upset to recently learn that Nicaragua received from the IMF $340 million. It's supposed to be used to help with the pandemic. But as you know, Nicaragua has one of the lowest rates of vaccinations in the entire Western Hemisphere. And to come and give them $340 million, I really do not agree with that at all. We either have to work together to bring these people online, or they're just going to do whatever they want with money that is given to them. So hopefully we'll track some of this money that's coming into Nicaragua to make sure that it goes to the people and it doesn't go into people's pocket. So we're working hard on that.
Thank you. Looking ahead to 2022 and really an opportunity to launch a proactive and robust engagement with the region, the U.S. will be hosting the 9th Summit of the Americas. What do you see some of the opportunities as the U.S. and regional leaders convene for the summit next year?
Well, the opportunities are that we have companies that are interested in doing business in this part of the world. And now we're going to have them in our country to work, to see if we can work together and make sure that the investments that people in America want to make in some of these countries, bear fruit for both the country and the United States. So I think it's a perfect opportunity where you get everybody together in a room and start talking about what can be done to improve the region and what can be done for American investment in this part of the world. So I think it's a win-win for both, for everyone. Let's hope it just takes place and nothing throws it off track, because this is the first time we're hosting this since it began.
That's right. I think we're looking forward to bringing together the private sector to work closely with the U.S. government and governments of the region to take advantage of this important platform. Thank you so much for your leadership, Congressman Series. And I would like to just invite you, if you have any final words that you'd like to share with the business leaders that we've convened today at the Forecast on Latin America and the Caribbean Conference.
Well, my final word is I don't see why we have to go to China when we have such good friends in this region. We should be working harder to make partners out of the countries in the Western Hemisphere so we don't have to depend on China. And these countries at the same time would be better off by working with the United States. China does not give anything for free, as we've seen in some of these other areas. So we'll be working hard on Congressman Green's bill to see if we can bring offshore nearshoring to fruition. So thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Series, and thank you again for your leadership, your deep commitment to engaging with the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean and strengthening U.S. leadership and partnership. Count on the member companies of ACLA, our AmChams, and the U.S. Chamber to work to support our shared objectives in the region. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Latin America is coming off a couple of tumultuous years, and its political risk remains elevated in many quarters of the region. Social unrest that rattled Chile, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia was followed by the pandemic shock and deepening inequality. It comes as no surprise, then, that opposition forces have dominated Latin America's elections this year. It started in April with conservative banker Guillermo Lasso prevailing in Ecuador's presidential election, and it continued with leftist schoolteacher Pedro Castillo coming out of nowhere to be declared Peru's new president in July. But the anti-ruling party sentiment became even more pronounced in primaries held in September in Argentina and Chile. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez's mismanagement of the economy during one of the harshest pandemic lockdowns in the world was blamed for the ruling coalition losing 5 million votes in the mandatory and open primaries compared to the October 2019 election. Back then, former Peronist President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner picked Alberto Fernández as her proxy president, while she took a backseat as VP, though clearly retaining the real power in the Argentine administration. But if the primary results hold and the ruling coalition again loses 18 of the 24 voting districts in the November midterms, then Alberto Fernández may go from proxy to lame duck president, as Cristina Fernández will most likely switch horses in the 2023 elections or even make another presidential run herself. Discontent with center-right President Sebastián Piñera's handling of Chile's 2019 social unrest and his administration's failure to provide significant stimulus to the economy during the pandemic lockdowns was reflected in a string of losses for the center-right parties. The violent protests 2 years ago forced the political establishment to commit to drafting a new constitution to replace the current one dating from Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship. And about half of the 155 Constitutional Assembly members elected in May to draft a new Magna Carta support making radical changes to the country's system. What's more, center-right candidates make up less than a third of the elected assembly members, meaning they will not be able to block by themselves constitutional proposals requiring a 2/3 majority approval. Then in the September open primaries, opposition candidates received a third more votes than their ruling coalition peers. And finally, leftist candidate Gabriel Boric remains the odds-on favorite for now to replace the very unpopular Piñera in the November presidential elections. In Mexico, 3 years after President López Obrador won the presidency in a landslide, his Morena party lost a considerable number of seats in Congress in the midterms. The opposition gained enough seats to block constitutional amendments, which is very relevant right now as the López Obrador administration is pushing a constitutional reform to establish state control over the electric power sector. This would have major implications for private generation projects as well as for miners, as the reform includes bringing lithium resources under state control as well. The current trend of voters rejecting ruling coalitions and voting for the opposition may hold next year when Colombians and Brazilians head to the polls. In Colombia, over 77% of the electorate disapproves of center-right President Iván Duque's handling of the economy and social protest. With Duque unable to seek re-election, Senator Gustavo Petro, a former guerrilla member and Bogota mayor, could become the country's first leftist president, though most parties have yet to name their candidates. But the region's most riveting and perhaps most consequential election will take place a year from now in Brazil, where incumbent right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro will likely face leftist former President Lula in his bid to remain in office. Bolsonaro's weak response to the COVID health crisis sparked a congressional investigation and sent protesters to the streets. Add to the mix rising inflation and poverty, and Bolsonaro finds himself in a very vulnerable position in a potential runoff against Lula, the charismatic founder of the Workers' Party, who currently leads polls by double digits. A big uncertainty hangs over the Brazilian election, however. Bolsonaro has suggested time and again that he does not trust Brazil's electronic voting system. Taking a page from Donald Trump's book, the Brazilian president is warning his supporters that the upcoming election may be rigged against him. And just like Trump never conceded to Joe Biden and even had his supporters storm the Capitol, expect Bolsonaro not to go gentle into that good night should he lose re-election.
I'd like to thank Sebastián Pérez Ferrero, Managing Editor of the business intelligence platform BNA Americas, for his political analysis of recent and upcoming elections in the region. Now we'll turn to our next topic of supply chains. Trade and investment are at the heart of the work of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce here in Washington, as we help companies grow their business at home and around the world. The topic of supply chains, where they're located and how they're functioning, are certainly top of mind for companies and governments. And we look forward to the conversation during our next session. I'm very pleased to turn over to my colleague, John Drake, Vice President, Supply Chain Policy. John, over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. And I'm really excited to be here this morning and very excited for the discussion we're having today. In the US, supply chains are getting a lot of attention these days. Supply chains are normally an invisible part of our economy, but recent events have brought them front and center for many Americans and for the world. During COVID, Americans experienced shortages of everything from toilet papers to K95 masks and everyday items so significant that it became a campaign issue during the presidential campaign. Concurrently, the US's relationship with China is changing, and with it, assumptions about where we should source many of our goods. Finally, the front pages of US newspapers are reporting every day on the enormous challenges that US ports are experiencing in terms of congestion and ocean carrying ships being stuck offshore waiting to unload goods for the US consumers. These developments are all big challenges, but they also present enormous opportunities for the world trade and for the United States as well. I'm excited for our conversation today and the speakers who will be help informing it. We have Maria Luisa Boyce. She's Vice President of Global Affairs for UPS, one of the world's largest shipping couriers, and a very, very important member for the Chamber as well. And then Phil Levy, the Chief Economist for Flexport, a leader in freight forwarding and customs. And I'm really excited to have you both here this morning and start the conversation. And if I may, I'd like to start the conversation by turning over to Maria for the first question. And Maria, last week, the UPS met with the White House to discuss global supply chain bottlenecks. We, as well as you and other US companies, are welcoming the opportunity to engage on this very important crisis, but it's a tough crisis. Your leadership participated in this meeting with the White House. And I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, where do you see UPS and other companies playing a pivotal role in alleviating these bottlenecks?
Okay, better now? Yes.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much to the Chamber and ACLA for the invitation. It is really an honor to be here. And definitely, Jake, we are living interesting times and challenges on the supply chain. For us, one of our first and utmost concerns is how do we keep the cargo moving and support our customers and make certain that the economy continues the path towards recovery. As we expressed in the meeting last week, and what we're doing as a company, it really, and all the companies that are engaged in moving cargo, for us, most important is how do we find solutions that can alleviate the process. And so we're part of the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach Accelerated Cargo Initiative, which it's a program that consists in the commitment of data sharing and be able to provide data in a timely manner that allows to expedite and have better movement. And that's where we have a 24/7 operation, port operations, sharing data, and that is allowing us to move 20% more containers. We are firmly committed to this effort, and it is an effort that definitely is showing us how do we need to continue to learning from this experience. What are the changes that we need to look forward to make those changes? What type of technology, what type of data do we share on a timely manner, and make certain that we don't lose productivity, but be able to increase it. Last but not least, and I think we'll talk about this later, but let's think also why is all of this happening, right? We, through the pandemic, saw an increase on e-commerce and changes in e-commerce that we expected to take 5 to 10 years, happen in 9 months. And so we're seeing more volume, a change in the consumer behavior, and all of this is accumulating to the real need that we have to invest in infrastructure and invest in the right management of information and data.
Thank you. Phil, a lot of talk right now is that this is a crisis that we're going to see through 2022, and potentially some are saying even longer beyond that for the United States. What do you see as having to need to change to begin to see progress on the congestion that we're seeing at our ports?
Yeah, it's a difficult question how long this is going to last, and I wish I had better news. When I look into our crystal ball, this is going to be with us, I think, through next year. It's a real challenge, and I'll give you 3 reasons why. Reason number 1, the supply side of logistics, which is it is very difficult to expand capacity significantly in the short run. I think some of the stuff that Maria Luisa was just talking about, the White House initiative, these are valiant efforts and they will make a positive difference at the margin, but we're really seeing volumes that are in excess of what the system was built to bear. So that gets me to item 2, which is demand. One of the things we've really seen as the core driver of the supply chain crisis is people just decided they wanted a lot of goods, and a lot more goods than they had wanted in the past. And not in a small way, in a very big way. Things that have been constant for a long time, like the way consumption was allocated between goods and services, suddenly swung heavily in favor of buying goods, and that's put a strain on the system. We understand why. Of course, people are at home and you can't go out to the restaurants and the gyms and the like that everyone would like to. But that has put a huge strain on the system. That has not yet shown signs of abating, both because of people's income and their preferences. The final thing I'll note in terms of why I think this is with us for a while is there's a very substantial backlog that both in terms of company inventories that have gotten, retailer inventories that have gotten very low that they would like to refill, and just containers waiting to get moved to where they need to go. There's a long backlog. So even if you have a demand let up, there's going to be a lag between when that happens to the sort of more relaxed, normal functioning of the system.
Thank you. Maria, I think back to you. These are, I think there's also, Phil spoke to this as well. There are a lot of sort of underlying cracks that I think have been in our supply chain system for quite some time, right? I mean, if you look at the top 300 ports in the world, the 2 largest in the United States, right, LA and Long Beach, are at the bottom of the list of the most productive ports in the world, despite the amount of volumes that come in. what are some of the bigger changes you think need to take place at our ports to really begin to make sure that we don't experience this black swan event happening again?
So, Jake, thank you for the question. I think it's $1 million question. If we had the answer, we would be doing much better. I can tell you what, and to what Phil was talking about, some of the areas that we have identified that we've been working on for many years, right? I started when I was 5 years old, 25 years ago. But maybe to put it into perspective, I will say three areas that we need to focus. And one is the data. Data management is important. If you can receive data in advance, and that's very key, that can help facilitate the movement and decision making that authorities need to go through to be able to clear the cargo. That data goes to my second term that is important. Risk management is vital, meaning that if we really go to the principles of what we discussed in the trade facilitation agreement that passed many years ago, it really makes a difference to have those risk management that allow you to, using the data and doing the risk assessment in advance, ports can more efficiently move the cargo. And then the third one, really, that is a concern, and I think Phil was mentioning and alluding it, is we have to really look at what are the human resources available, because understanding supply chain, so you have data, you have risk management, and then you have to move the cargo. And so it's not only the containers coming to the ports, but then the containers have to be put in a truck that has to be driven, right, to a warehouse. And we are also seeing a shortage of workers. And I think that third part of really understanding and working together, government and private sector and industries and labor, and understanding what are those needs, because the demand is increasing and continuing. I think those are areas that can help us better prepare for the future. One last thing that I will say is, Jake, that is important, is really making an assessment of what were we working and talking about for so much about automation, risk management, and data, that now the pandemic and the challenges that we face now are really showing us it's needed, right? And that we need to be pay attention to those details.
Phil, let me ask you one more question on the experience of what's happening at the ports right now, and then I think let's move over to some of the opportunities with the discussions about reshoring and supply chains, et cetera. So your CEO tweeted recently about kind of a novel sort of concept in this world today, which is paying it forward, right? I think Flexport was actually delivered a series of food trucks, if I understand correctly, to the ports of LA and Long Beach to support the workers who were there, working overtime to help get these containers off ports and to where they ultimately need to go. And with that movement, I think your CEO, Ryan Pedersen, had a number of observations about what he saw on the ground. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right. We deployed the taco truck. And we went and we're trying to see, well, there's been a lot of talk about what's been happening at this key port of LA Long Beach, and we wanted to see how was this actually playing out. That it's great to have the 30,000 foot view, but also the on the ground view. And I guess there's probably, you should read what Ryan tweets because he's good at it. But to give you the executive summary, I think one lesson is that 24/7 port operation doesn't matter if you don't have the trucking flow that's required to go with it. A second observation, container congestion is a really big problem. And this is intimately linked, of course, with the first, that if you're not clearing the containers, the port's open, you unload more things from ships, but it just gets very congested. A third point, which particularly resonated with me, was that equipment and maintenance are an issue. I think, as I said earlier, we have a system that wasn't designed for this kind of capacity. And as you run that at full capacity, peak load for a very long time, you start getting equipment and maintenance issues. And then some of the stuff that Maria Luisa was just talking about, she picked up, there's certain things where they don't easily scale, that you can't just do 40% more. So having, skilled labor or, the requisite management, these are tough. That if you say, well, we're going to go from, a regular long work week to round the clock, do you have the people with the skills who can do that?
Thank you. One thing that is, I think, not being reported as much, but I think it's very much on the minds of policymakers here in Washington, D.C., is this concurrent initiative that the Biden administration is leading regarding kind of a wide-scale sort of review of the resilience of American supply chains. A lot of this began with the shortages Americans experienced during COVID, with everything from bottled water to toilet paper and the like. But it also, I think, is also being generated as well by the changing relationship that the U.S. has with China. And so a lot of the discussion right now is China, should it continue to be sort of the producer of so many American goods? And if not, if there are opportunities to reshore in other parts of the world, where could that go? And maybe, Phil, I think a question for you, when companies rethink supply chains and when they rethink about potentially moving production out of China and other parts of the world, from your perspective, Flexport's perspective, what is infrastructure, labor, security? What does this all mean in the equation for how companies are looking to source and move production?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think this is a moment of opportunity for Latin America. I think, what you can say is the clients we've spoken to, the people we've worked with, they're happy to look around. They're happy to examine alternatives. But the key thing to keep in mind is that examination is going to be a very thorough examination. It's not just going to be what are labor costs. It's not just going to be, how many ships can you take at one time in the port. It will include those, but it's the whole thing. It's how easy is it to produce goods there? How easy is it to get the parts that you need? What is security like? What is the political environment like? Are the rules predictable? What are all the sort of supporting operations? How easy is it to do trucking, for example, to move stuff to the interior when you need to? So, what are airport operations? What is air service? There's that whole suite is going to be what's examined. And so, yes, all the things you mentioned and more are going to play into that. So I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that this is going to be a thorough, holistic examination.
Yeah, and Maria, piggybacking on that, trade facilitation is also a critical part of this discussion as well. And in your understanding, when you're looking at trade facilitation measures within Latin America and the Caribbean, what do you see as important steps that regional governments need to do to attract companies to relocate to their borders or to bring new investment? And what are some of the key factors that are still missing that could limit a country's potential to attract more investment?
So thank you, Jake. And I agree with Phil. It really is a holistic view of many areas. But I will say for me, the three top areas that in Latin America we still need to work together as a team and as a community are, first, the rule of law and the transparency is very important. And I think yesterday I was talking to a good friend from another company that reminded me businesses want a consistency and to know what to expect, right? And I think in Latin America we still need to make certain that we have that rule of law and that transparency of what are the regulations, what are the framework, what is the framework that we need to work on, and that is very important. And that really helps trade facilitation in terms that the saying in Spanish, for those that speak Spanish, that I always use is cuentas claras, chocolate espeso. If you know what to expect and you have the framework, then that helps. I think the second one is the continuing need to improve that relationship between the society, business, and governments, right? There is a lack of trust in many cases from both sides, and I think that's important to be able to find a solution, because it's going to take the work of everybody to make certain that the economies move forward. And there has to be that trust that combined with the rule of law, with the framework, and having that part of the trust that helps. Trust in having a conversation with the private sector that was part of the trade facilitation agreement that many countries in Latin America sign on, but maybe has not been implemented, that they can sit down and co-create and have brainstorm what solutions can they find together that can help the movement of goods, exports, imports, or the economy. And then the last part, and this has been discussed a lot, but we really, and we have seen it in Latin America in the past 10 years, continue to do this is we need to look at what does it mean to have an inclusive trade agenda in Latin America. How do we make certain that all the players in the community are part of the economy? And this implies about moving from the informal to the formal economy, to make certain that it's okay if you're a small business and you want to export, that you can do it, right? And that you have the tools and it's easy for you to do, and it's a clear path, and that helps the economy. How do we handle the challenge of protecting the economy while at the same time allowing to have goods that can come in and be affordable for people to buy them? Because you want the wealth to be spread out across the society. So I think, Jake, sounds very philosophical, and I like what Phil was saying about there's the high level and there's the 30,000 view and then on the ground. But those three things I think we're seeing are going to be important, that will make a difference in Latin America to allow for that flow of import and export. The geographical advantage of Latin America is there. And sometimes I think we put our own roadblocks to make certain to take full advantage of it to be part of the economy.
As a follow-up for both you and Phil, and not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Maria Luisa and Phil, in your estimation, what countries are doing it right now? Like what are they doing right that they're kind of following through on the sorts of recommendations that you were discussing?
Letting Phil go first. Gentlemen first.
Right. I don't know that there's anybody who has a perfect scorecard. I think some of the countries that are getting a very close look and that have distinguished themselves a bit, a few that come to mind, Mexico, clearly with things like NAFTA first and USMCA and a commitment to integration that may have wavered a bit during the pandemic. That's important. Peru is a country that's been making, I think, serious efforts, and that's noteworthy. And then I'll toss in Colombia as well. Mm-hmm. And not a coincidence that these are all players that have been very active in pursuing trade agreements and trying to integrate and work to make this as reliable partners.
I will agree with Phil. I think Colombia is a country that, despite challenges and situations, I was listening to the political review earlier, but continues to move forward the economy and allow for forward thinking. There's always setbacks, right? Of course, of legislations that come out at the end of the day that you're like, well, where did this come from? Chile is another country that also, despite the challenges that they've been facing, continue to implement and put some policies in place that help with the trade facilitation. I think and the reason why I hesitated to answer immediately which other countries, I do believe there is that spirit of trade agreements in all of Latin America. What we have learned through the pandemic and the movement, for example, of vaccines or PPE or others, is that there's still that in many countries there's still there's the investment on technology and automation. There's the thought of it, and many countries in Latin America have that process. What is missing is connecting that automation and IT investment with the policy making, so that they put it in writing, the regulations, so that implementation is seamless. So I think maybe, Jake, and I'm optimist by nature. Everybody that knows me knows that. But I think we're almost there in the region, but we have to make certain that we allow that full implementation to be best practices.
Thank you. I've got one more question. I think we'll wrap up, but I think we've talked a lot about what other countries need to do or where there are opportunities. There's been enormous disruptions in trade in the last few years. Can you talk a little bit as we close out this discussion about what changes both of your companies are doing in response to the disruptions in trade, COVID, and what you potentially see as sort of sticking going forward? And maybe, Maria Luisa, I know you said gentlemen first, but let's maybe turn it back to you and
Great. No, of course. I think so. So we have learned a lot in the past year and a half, and as a company, as all of us, right, had to pivot and adapt, and how do we address? I think I will go three areas of what we're doing right now. One, definitely. One of the areas and one of the businesses that we saw were more impacted were small businesses, and we have really focused as a company. How do we help train, leverage our know-how and help small businesses in the region around the world? We launched a women exporter program in Latin America, to partnering with government organizations to provide training and capacity building so that they can have the tools to be part of the economy. And that is something that as a company we have done. The second thing is really reassess, and going now to the supply chain and the topics we were talking earlier, how much more do we look at the technology that is needed, the sharing of data, and continue to sit side by side with governments and help them understand how do we have a better process and movement of supply chain, understanding the permits. All of a sudden, if we think about it, ministers of health were making decisions of how to move cargo, and we're maybe not talking as much to customs agencies. And so how do we learn from what we have seen in the past and find those best practices so that you have a more seamless process down the road? And last but not least, as a company, we're really looking at how do we look at a sustainable supply chain process, and that is a topic that comes and flows in different perspectives, and you have different messages from different angles. But as a company we're very much concerned about what is that footprint and how do we help. And consumers do say that they care about sustainability, but 9 out of 10 do not choose to pay more or do more in action, which is the reality. We're also thinking as a company, what can we do so that customers don't have a choice, right? We are doing the changes that we have to do too. So those are the three areas that we're focusing on. E-commerce is here to stay and to grow, and so how do we make certain that everybody takes advantage of it and that we move our cargo effectively?
Phil, I'm going to turn to you for the last word.
Yeah, I very much like the stuff. It's a hard act to follow. But I'm gonna pick up the technology refrain because I think Maria Luisa has that exactly right. Technology is at our core. It's part of what it was, the whole raison d'etre for our business and what we're doing. And so we're trying to use that to give companies more visibility, ease of management. I think that's become more important. I think it's going to stay important. We're going to stick with it. In the crisis, we've been looking at alternatives and trying to show some ingenuity, things like premium shipping, ways to get around some of the difficulties. And working with a range of partners. And I think really it's the same theme I've been striking all along. We try to help people with the end-to-end operation of supply chains, where it's not just moving containers between ports, but it's you combine and do a container to make things easy with less than container loads. What happens with customs, insurance, inland operations. So we're trying to facilitate that whole holistic approach.
Excellent. Maria Luisa and Phil, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate the conversation and really appreciate your insights. Thank you. And we'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
At Viatris, we aim to empower people worldwide to live healthier at every stage of life. We're dedicated to delivering increased access to the medicines patients need, regardless of geography or circumstance. Because at Viatris, we believe in healthcare, not as it is, but as it should be.
As our program comes to a close, I'd like to thank all of our distinguished speakers and moderators for contributing to a very productive conversation. Today, we've examined topics that will shape the agenda for inclusive and sustainable growth, and two key themes are clear: the need for action and the importance of collaboration. We heard that message this morning from President Cortizo of Panama, who shared his government's efforts to get the pandemic under control, spoke about the importance of building a vibrant investment climate, and reinforced the need for action on important regional challenges such as climate and migration. For the view from Congress, Congressman Series reinforced the importance of U.S. engagement in the hemisphere, highlighted priorities related to democracy and economic growth, and noted important examples of bipartisan support, including his work with Congressman Green to incentivize investment in the region through Congressman Green's proposed Nearshoring Act. And we also heard from business leaders from our member companies about the importance of sustainability and supply chains to economic growth and a sustainable recovery. Today, we also heard supply chains described as a network of capabilities from origin to destination. That really stood out to me as it involves people, processes, and infrastructure. And again, in terms of sustainability, people at the center of solutions to today's challenges. So to close, I'd like to thank the people at the heart of what we do at the Chamber and ACLA. ACLA is a community of business leaders committed to building a brighter future in the Americas. And for their contributions to our work, I'd like to thank the ACLA's chairs, leadership circle companies, and our member AmChams, and all of the member companies of AmChams across the region. And I'd especially like to thank the incredible team that makes events like this one possible. In particular, Isabel Quiroz, the Executive Director of ACLA, Maximiliano Sepulveda, Associate Manager, Neil Harrington, the SVP for the Americas, for his leadership, and the entire Americas team that has contributed to today's program, as well as our colleagues across the Chamber who've joined us as well. So thank you all. Thank you to an amazing events team and AV team for making this possible. We all want to invite you to join us again tomorrow for a terrific lineup of speakers. So thank you again for being here, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day.